With the Catholic Church embroiled in scandals, with the prospect of facing hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits over sexual abuse of minors, both the clergy and parishioners have been searching for ways of restoring the credibility of the Church. One subject that comes up repeatedly is the Church's hard and fast rule that Roman Catholic priests take a lifelong vow of celibacy, remain unmarried, and refrain from sexual relations. What you may not know is that the celibacy rule is not so hard and fast. There are, right here in the United States, married Roman Catholic priests, and they have the blessing of the Pope. Father Christopher Phillips has been the pastor of Our Lady of the Atonement, a church in San Antonio, Texas, for nearly 20 years, ever since he left the Episcopal Church and converted to Catholicism. He says Mass, he gives communion.
The body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ, keep an everlasting life.
But unlike most priests, he has a family.
Who was that young man that was calling all over the place for you last night?
5 children, his wife Joanne, and a grandson. What do your kids call you? They call you father?
When in public, in front of other people, yes, they always call me father. Of course, at home, it's dad.
They're aware of the anomaly.
Yes, yes. They've grown up with this. But when they were in school, I remember my son came home once in tears because one of his friends insisted his father could not be a priest. And he said, "Daddy, I kept telling him you're a priest, and he won't believe me."
The only Roman Catholic priests who are allowed to have wives and families are clergymen who converted from other Christian denominations and were already married when they became Catholic. These priests had never taken a vow of celibacy.
Lift up your hearts.
Father Phillips, once an Episcopal priest, became a Catholic because he thought the Episcopal Church was becoming too liberal.
The big thing that really got me out of the Episcopal Church into the Catholic Church was the Catholic Church's teaching on abortion, artificial contraception, those moral issues.
Good morning, nice to see you.
The parish in San Antonio has grown under his leadership. He says being married may have helped him as a counselor. You're aware of the problems of marriage, problems of raising children.
Teenagers.
Teenagers, all of those things.
Sometimes it helps if you've been there and you've been through it.
Father Michael Scheib has also been there.
There you go, Tommy. Go, go, go.
This former Lutheran minister doesn't see any conflict between being a father to his 5 sons and being father to everyone else.
The Lord be with you. When I'm with my parishioners, I'm a priest who happens to be married. At home, I'm a father and a husband who happens to be a priest. Samuel Vincent, I baptize you in the name of the Father.
He's a priest with the Diocese of Venice, Florida. The Catholic Church says it doesn't keep records on exactly how many married priests there are in the U.S., probably only 100 or so. Father John Ellis, formerly an Episcopalian, and his wife Burgess feel a bit like an experiment that's being closely watched by the Church and by other priests.
Most of the priests understand that Burgess and I are pioneers, that we are perhaps allowing the hierarchy of the Church to take a first-hand look at celibacy and married priests and see that married priests can be a happy addition to the Catholic Church.
In fact, the Pope himself approved bestowing the priesthood on these married men. Bishop Joseph Galante is chief spokesman for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Is the acceptance of married priests, the Church putting its toe in the water on this one?
Well, I can say this: it's putting its toe in the water. It's done it, and it's very interesting that most Catholics have had no problems accepting married men who have been ordained priests.
Lift up your hearts.
Father Ellis of St. Bernard's Church in Florida says most of his parishioners have no trouble accepting him.
One question is, why hasn't it happened earlier? Why can't all priests get married?
When Christianity began, there was no vow of celibacy. The Bible suggests that at least one of the apostles, St. Peter, was married.
The first millennium, of the Catholic Church. Priests were married. By the way, popes were married.
Father Richard McBrien, a professor of theology at Notre Dame, favors making celibacy optional. He says celibacy is a man-made rule that has changed over the centuries.
In the Roman Catholic Church, it never became a universal law until the 12th century. Then it became a matter of practicality. Priests and bishops were leaving church property to their children, so they had to stop that.
So sound economic reasons.
Yes, and now the reason is that celibacy is God's gift to the church, and that it allows the priest to have a closer relationship to Christ and the church.
You say that making celibacy optional would solve a lot of problems within the church. How?
It would allow the Catholic Church to draw from a far wider pool of potential recruits for the priesthood. We're running out of good priests.
About 20,000 men have left the American priesthood in the past 30 years. Most left over the issue of celibacy, adding to a serious shortage of priests. Nearly 3,000 parishes have no resident priest at all. Lee Ganem left the priesthood because he wanted to have a family. He's a husband, father, and grandfather, with his own chain of restaurants in the Florida Keys, living what most people would call the good life. Do you have any regrets about leaving the active priesthood?
Regrets? No. I have been blessed with a most beautiful wife and 4 precious sons. But regret is that I know in my heart that I am still a priest, I'll always be a priest, and that God wants me to be a priest.
Lee Ganem knew he wanted to be a priest since childhood, and he entered a seminary at age 17 and gladly took a vow of celibacy.
It was such an honor in those days to be called to the priesthood. And you were taught that before all time, before your birth, God had anointed you, had picked you. That you were so honored with all that, you never stopped to consider what impact celibacy might have on your life as a grown man.
The turning point came when his brother and sister-in-law asked him to baptize their daughter.
And I remember at the time, Mr. Safer, seeing and experiencing the love between my brother and sister-in-law and their child. And I knew then that I needed to have my own family.
If celibacy became an option,
yes,
would you go back to the priesthood?
I'd be the first one in line. I've been in line for 28 years because I know that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to pray for you.
Ganem belongs to a group of about 2,500 former priests. All but a few of them are married.
All glory and honor is yours, Almighty Father.
They continue to perform Mass and other priestly duties.
We have a blessing of palms, so if you...
even though the church does not recognize them. They also continue to lobby the church, demanding the same rights as married priests who converted from other Christian denominations. There are married priests, fully priests, within the Catholic Church. Isn't there a little bit of hypocrisy here?
These are good men, and I have no problem with them. It's the issue of justice. Is it just? Are we talking out of both sides of our mouths, Mother Church? Why are they able and we are not?
I've talked to former priests who left the church in order to get married and have made great success out in the business world, who would give it up in a minute.
To go back?
To go back.
I understand that. I mean, they didn't want to leave the ministry. I mean, that was their vocation. That's their call. That's the terrible thing, really, about the law of obligatory celibacy. It links inextricably the call to ministry with the call to live a celibate life. And they don't necessarily work together.
What's more, McBrien says that seminaries attract a disproportionately high number of homosexuals, which may well be part of the church's problems.
My position is that gays can be good priests. They are good priests. But it's not healthy when the gay culture is the dominant culture in a seminary. We have evidence that it has actually driven many heterosexual young men out of seminaries who otherwise felt they had a call to the priesthood.
The Notre Dame Seminary in New Orleans accepts both heterosexuals and homosexuals. But all of them must undergo psychological testing before they're accepted. in the hopes of rooting out young men with sexual and emotional problems, problems with celibacy.
We discuss it in our classes. We discuss it in workshops. Counseling is offered.
Beau Charbonnet has 1 year left at the seminary. Ricardo Phipps just graduated and was ordained a priest. And Joseph Bordelon is the new kid in the school. I don't mean to pry, but have you all had sexual experiences before you made this commitment,
Yes.
before you decided to come to seminary?
You know what you're giving up. Yeah.
Was it difficult for you?
Yeah. You know, I think we'd be lying to say it's not difficult. It's just by our nature, you know, we want to have sex.
If celibacy were optional, which would you choose?
In thinking of the call, celibacy has always been a part of it. A married priesthood for me just doesn't fit.
It's taken me 5 years to discern whether or not celibacy is for me, so it'd probably take me another 5 years to discern whether or not marriage would be for me. So it would be very difficult for me to say right off the bat that I definitely wouldn't choose that.
There's been a lot of criticism within the church itself about too many homosexuals within the church. You aware of this?
I'm not extremely concerned about there being too many homosexuals in the priesthood. What my concern is that there would be too many people, heterosexual or homosexual, who are not being true to the promise of celibacy.
Father McBrien says it's an open secret that priests do have affairs, especially priests in Latin America and Africa.
Celibacy isn't practiced there in large measure. The people understand that the priest has his wife, quotes, his children, his family. They accept it.
And Rome turns a blind eye.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Don't ask, don't tell.
Could that happen here?
Yes. Some of the best priests have very close friendships, and they're good priests. People accept it.
About 75% of American Catholics say they're in favor of ending celibacy, but that's unlikely to happen.
I would be very surprised to see a pope come in to do sweeping changes.
Of course, sweeping changes in the church are changes that may take place over, say, 500
centuries.
years.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think that obligatory celibacy will continue after this pope leaves the scene?
No. In the long range, at least, it's toast. For so many years, over 23 years, this pope has kept the issue off the table. It's not allowed it to be discussed. And because of the sex abuse crisis that has erupted in the Catholic Church, especially in this country, it is now very much back on the table.